Hi, this is Joe Rabil with Rabil Stock Research. So we're going to start out with a lesson on MACD, and I want to talk about MACD crossovers. I think there's a lot of mistakes sometimes looking at these as trigger points. Sometimes they can be, but I'm going to show you when the majority of the time we're going to look for a second entry off of those. But the real importance of the crossover, especially when we use them in multiple time frames, is something I want to go over. All right, so we'll do that, and then we're going to cover a lot of stocks today. I want to go through a number of different symbols. All right, let's go ahead and get going. Okay, so we've got our 4 time frames up with Broadcom, AVGO, monthly chart in the bottom left, weekly in the bottom right, daily in the upper right, and an hourly in the upper left. Now, I want to start with the daily. The first thing I would suggest is that I don't really like using indicators as triggers. I'd rather use price to signify it's a time to enter. All right. Most of the time, the indicators are giving us a condition that's in place that is optimal, and then we want to take advantage of a price move. However, there are times when we can use what's taken place in the indicator to really zero in on the proper timing. So let's start with the daily chart, and I want to show how, if you notice here, we get a crossover right here. Where the MACD crosses over its signal line. It's below the zero line, but we cross over the signal line, which is in red. All right. Now, what I want to do is just show you, I'm going to use the crosshairs to show that the day that it closed to create that crossover was way up here. All right, so we've had a move of pretty substantial proportions. We had a pretty good move off the low, and then we actually had a retracement bar, but then we had this monster green bar to the upside, right? Now, when I look at this, I kind of feel like I don't really want to buy after a big monster move like this, even though this looks like this is the start of the move. And when you look at it from a bigger picture standpoint, it seems like it's early. But when you're in the moment and you're looking to be a buyer, getting in and then watching it drop over the next 5, 6, 7 days sometimes, to me, is not as attractive. So what I like to do is I'm on the lookout for after it crosses over. If it crosses over after the second bar, so if it's the third bar that causes the crossover, then I'm going to wait in most cases for a pullback, and the pullback shows up on the MACD itself as a little pinch towards the signal line. So it makes a move and creates separation, and then it pinches back towards while price is pulling back. In most cases, it'll be pulling back towards the 18 or in the 18 area. All right. Now, when we get that signal, then I feel like we're taking advantage of the newborn trend, right? The new condition, the new bullish condition, which is the signal, the MACD line is now above the signal line, all right? And as long as it stays above, we kind of have an upward bias, all right? So it's giving us an upward bias to play with. But we also want to use these pullbacks and take advantage of them. So we had a pullback here. We actually had a 3 to 4 bar pause. It shows up a little bit in the histogram there. And then we got another 2 bar pause there. It shows up a little bit again in the histogram at that point. And then we had another one here before making a little bit of a move, and then a sharp pullback that caused the crossover to the downside. All right. Now, so hopefully you can see that we can really take advantage of a situation where we show good strength to the upside, but the entry itself using the crossover, it's not as attractive. However, it is attractive from a bias standpoint. It's telling us the bias. The newborn bias is to the upside. Now, let's look at what some other things we can learn from using this crossover. So if we go and look at the monthly chart and we look at this crossover back here that took place in 2023, make this strong move, right? And then we get this pause or pullback, as I mentioned, that causes this pinch on this time frame. Now that's in 2023. So let's just look at what was taking place on the weekly chart in 2023. If we scroll back, you can see, in fact, let's put this up here. You can see what actually took place is that we had that strong move that caused the crossover on the monthly, but then on the weekly chart, we consolidate, and it's a negative crossover. and then it's a new emerging crossover to the upside. And in this case, again, we would have waited for a pullback. But this was an optimum entry here using the two time frames together. So we get the crossover to the upside, and then on a minor pullback on one time frame, it causes a correction on another time frame. All right, that happened again a little bit later. If we look at what took place here, another move, and then we consolidated back, it caused a downside crossover. And then this time it was just, there was really no, unless you bought the breakout of this move above this, there was really no entry there. But what I really want to talk about is the zero line crossover, because sometimes when you get a sharp pullback that comes back to the 18 on one time frame, in this case the monthly, where you get a 2 to 3 bar pullback, normally it needs to be about 3 bars. All right, if you get that, in a lot of cases it will create a zero line reversal on the lower time frame. So we get a pinch on one time frame and a zero line reversal on the other. Now, I'm not saying that we need to wait for that signal after the crossover takes place here. We can take advantage of these little pullbacks that take place after the crossover, but I would be on the lookout for when we get a correction or a pullback in an ongoing trend that creates a pinch play, and the pullback gets closer to the 18 as opposed to these where it kind of stayed above. Where we get closer to the 18, it could be 3 to 4 bars where it pulls back, and then we create a pinch play on this time frame. We do like to see strong momentum in place based on the ADX as well, but we get that pinch, and then on this time frame we're getting a zero line reversal because this has come back enough. Now, if we go back to our original thesis here, what we were looking at here off this low, you can see that we can combine all three of these time frames to really zero in and see that what actually took place was we had a pinch on the monthly chart that created a zero line reversal on this chart, right? Showing we're back to kind of like support based on the MACD zero line. And then on this time frame, we get a strong move off the low that creates the crossover, and then we wait for the pinch for a better entry, and now we're entering here, and that's really off of the low here, which is off of this turn here. So we're combining three time frames using this we're looking at the crossover signal here, but in reality, we're taking into account this time frame and this time frame to really zero in on the best signals that can take place. So that's what I'm constantly on the lookout for, is really where I can combine the bigger time frames and say, yeah, I've got a pinch play here, but in reality, I've actually have it in conjunction with what's taking place on the bigger time frames. I think that's ideal. Hopefully this helps. Let's go ahead and move on. If you're enjoying the content, hit that like button and also subscribe. So my services can be found at rabilstockresearch.com. I'm on this page right now. You can see at the top, I've got my advanced trend and momentum courses. There's 3 different courses now. I've individually priced them, or you can buy them as a bundle, and they are lifetime access now. So I changed that. It's not year to year. Okay. And then we have the individual package. I have about 2 to 3 reports each week, plus a special weekly video for that package that covers a lot of details into what I'm seeing for the week. So if you have an interest, go ahead and take a look. Also, the book is on the book tab. You can go if this is a good place to start if you're new to my methodology. My comments are for educational purposes only. Please do your own research before making any investment decisions. All right, we're going to start out with the QQQ and the IWM, and then I want to go through a whole host of symbols. I had a decent amount of requests this week, plus I did want to go through a number of symbols. I talked to a lot of institutions during the course of a week, get lots of questions about individual stocks, so I thought I'd just put out a list of these that I talked about this week and I thought were of interest to a lot of different people. All right, so let's go ahead and get started with the QQQ. So we are essentially breaking out on this chart here on the QQQ, but we've done it in a way that's it's up several weeks in a row. It's not I guess the way I put it is, typically if you break out from an overbought condition, you don't usually look for follow through. You look for some consolidation in the near term. So I'm sort of expecting that. Now it's possible to just keep pushing higher, but one of the things that I noticed this week or saw this week that just happened yesterday is the sentiment numbers really jumped up significantly, more bullish, a lot less bears, a lot more bulls. So I think that's going to provide a little bit of a headwind, in my opinion, as we move on here. Now, it might not have an immediate impact, but we're now currently overbought and we're pretty bullish. All right. So typically when I see that, I'm thinking hesitation, pause, pullback, correction, something like that. So just be aware of that. I think it's pretty important to recognize. So I use this RSI 5 to kind of give me a feeling of where we are from a short-term overbought, oversold, when we're way deeply oversold at the end of March, early April. And now we've gotten up into a pretty decent overbought condition. Again, more short-term, but because it's a weekly chart, it does give a pretty good sense of where we stand. So pretty good overall pattern. The one good news this week was the fact that the green DI started to get going on both the S&P and the Qs here. So we're getting a little bit of a confirmation. The problem I've got is that we haven't had any confirmation for the whole move. And now we're getting a move. Now we're getting a little bit of acceleration, and now it's getting confirmation. So to me, it's more of a climatic signal, sign of look for a climax here, some type of reversal or maybe false breakout. Now, I mean, we have to respect it as long as, so let's just take a closer look. So we crossed above this 18-day and it started to turn up. And then we got a few slight pullbacks, but never touched the line. But then look at how we held the line, held the line, held the line, held the line. This line is very important. You get 2 or 3 touches that hold. I think you really have to respect it. Now, until this is broken, this is the same as the S&P. If we break the 18, I think it'll be a fairly important, most of the time it's not all that important, but in this case, I think it'll be a little bit more important thing to watch because we've gotten so far away from the 18-week and so far away from the 18-month line. All right, let's look at the IWM. We've got the same problem here, which is an underperforming index that's trying to push higher and play along. And it has made a decent move off the low and off of support, but it still isn't showing any real signs of outperformance. We're starting to show maybe a little bit over the last day or two, but not enough to get things turned around. I think what we really need to see is this to come back up here, make a move a little bit stronger, maybe get up to 225 and then look for a pullback. And hopefully we'll see some signs of improving momentum conditions. All right, let's start running through some of these symbols. First thing is the Global Copper Miners ETF, the COPX. Look at what's taking place here. We've got a huge base that had been forming on the monthly chart. Notice how this had been going sideways, but notice how the MACD had been holding the zero line throughout this whole period over the last few years, right? And now we're starting to kind of kick into gear, getting this MACD to cross above the zero line to the upside. So I think this is kind of intriguing. We're getting that crossover signal on the monthly chart, improving the bias. Remember, that's a bias signal, not a timing signal. So we want to start watching for some of these copper stocks, or you could look for this specific index on a little pullback. I want to do this a little bit more rapid fire than I typically do and go through some of these symbols. Maybe I spend a few more times on the first ones and I'll go through the others a little bit quicker. So we got this Apollo had a pretty deep pullback, but it's finding support at the 18-month. Now, typically the way I handle this, when we get this kind of overrun, where you overrun, the MACD overruns like this, we expect a little bit more consolidation, a little bit more of, maybe check back, and maybe a little bit more confirmation coming up through resistance at 150 would be pretty good confirmation that maybe things are starting to turn back up to the upside. So that's really what I would be watching for. You can see on this daily chart, we have, essentially a low ADX pattern down here, right? Low ADX has been below for an extended period of time, and price has been moving sideways. So we want to look for a breakout in that pattern. I think if that takes place, then it kind of kicks things into gear in all 3 time frames. YOU, look at this setup. Now, one of the things I don't like is this big red bar. It shows up on the weekly, shows up on the monthly, but then look at what's taken place since then. We've held the 18-month and cupped around. The MACD held. Okay, and then we had a zero line reversal here where we've just kind of forming almost like a little double bottom right around the zero line with a low ADX condition. Now, low ADX in this case means that the sellers never really took over enough strength. I think this is actually a pretty nice low ADX breakout on the daily chart. You see how we have a low ADX for a pretty extended period down here. And then we make this really strong move on a breakout. Now, most of the time when we break out and we're already short-term overbought, you would look for some kind of a test, which you could do. But if you're looking at this from a bigger picture standpoint, it might not really matter. This is a pretty attractive pattern here. COMM. Look at how this found support at the 18-month line and then had a pretty strong move off of that pinch, right? So we're getting a pinch move to the upside. So here's the pinch on the monthly chart and the zero line reversal on the weekly chart, right? And when there's not a big amount of overrun, which there was not here, and there's no strength to the downside, you can play the trend line break, which would have gotten you in sometime over the course of a week or two before the big green bar showed up. So pretty attractive pattern from that standpoint. Now in the short term, I think we need a pullback just based on how big of a move it made, even if we pull back a little bit closer to the 18-day. Notice how the relative strength line is hitting a new high here, really attractive. Okay, KKR, again, deep decline that caused overrun on the monthly MACD. And that means we need to be a little bit more patient, look for this to cup around. I'd actually like to see the 18-week cup around and maybe pull back. But this does look a lot like the APO we looked at to start. Strong down move, but it didn't break it. It bent it, but it didn't break. So we still got good momentum condition based on the ADX. We've got overrun on the MACD. That means be patient, but I would say we can still keep this on our watch list. It still looks pretty good. Okay. XERS, look at this on a monthly chart. So this monthly chart, I think, looks pretty good. We were in a massive downtrend, went sideways for several years, and now we're starting to show signs of life with a really strong MACD, ADX, and volume pattern, right? All those conditions in place. So that means, we've got a pretty good bias in place. Now we're looking for an entry pattern, and we've got this little ABC kind of consolidation pattern, but notice what's taking place. The price itself is making a higher low right around the 18, while MACD is making a lower low. So we have this reverse divergence, and we have a strong ADX condition in place. We're not showing a lot of selling strength. I think this is definitely worthy of watching. Now, we have created a low ADX because it's been low for almost 2 months now. So you probably want to see a strong move up through 5, I think, to confirm that this is starting to move again. All right. All right, let's start doing a little bit of rapid fire, looking at this BA. Look at what's taking place here. I'd be watching for a little bit of a pullback. The 18-month is still declining, so we want to see a little bit more strength, but the reversal that's taking place needs to be respected. For the first time in quite some time, we have this big triple bottom, but we're getting back above the 18-month. We need to see that flatten out. I'd like to see a little bit more strength in DI, but this is getting pretty close. GRAB, look at what's taking place here. We've got a really nice solid move, walking sideways as the 18-month climbs underneath with a really good volume pattern on the monthly. And now we've been walking it out in the form of an inverted head and shoulders. You see how we make a left shoulder here, we rally up, we make a head here, rally up, and then a right shoulder here and rally up. I think if we actually can take out this high up here around 5.25, 5.30, something like that, I'd probably want to take a pretty hard look at this. Look at MU. We've got a resurgence of some of these stocks that look like they had broken down and then formed a massive reversal in the form of an undercut and rally on the daily chart. But now look at what's taking place on the weekly. We're back above all this what was resistance should now be support. Look for any kind of a pullback, I think, into the lower 100s, maybe 110 or something like that. I think that looks pretty good. Nvidia is back up at the old high. We got to see how this reacts at this level, but really, they came right back for this stock. They came right back for it. The momentum is strong. And on the decline phase, the momentum was not all that strong, meaning the sellers were not that strong, and then we reversed back up. Now, I would be looking for some kind of a pullback in that before considering it. Nike. Now, I think this is important to recognize. We are only rallying up to the declining 18-month, all right? We got some pretty good signs of strength off of this last move telling me, yeah, we've probably made a low, but I think it's really early in the process. Don't be in a big rush on that one. PLTR has made a monster move. This has become one of the biggest stocks, and it just doesn't seem to want to give it up. But notice what's taken place here just on the daily recently. We've got some distribution taking place after breaking out to a new high. We don't really have the same momentum condition on the daily chart. The ADX is not anywhere near as strong as it was back in these moves. You see these moves back here? Look at the ADX readings we were getting. Now the ADX is sort of slowing down. We're not really getting the same reading on the weekly either. I think if the MACD were to cross over to the downside, that might lead to a little bit better correction phase. This Reddit, I hear about this, I get questions on this a lot. Pretty good move to the downside, and now you've made this little hitch and go, and we've broken out of a sideways consolidation to the upside and got very good momentum taking place on the daily chart. Now here's the problem. We can see what took place in the monthly. We had this big drop, and now we've retraced about half. Okay, and you left a lot of people holding the bag up there at 200. So I'm kind of the opinion that we need to let this settle a little bit, let the 18-week cup around, look for a pullback before you look for your next entry signal. Look at Tesla. Tesla keeps cupping around and respecting the 18-week. So it crossed above, tested it, and held. Rallied up again. Some sellers showed up. Again, still holding the 18-week. I think as long as it holds the 18-week, you have to give this some credit. And it's because it's above the 18-month. If it can get the 18-week rising and get this back up through this resistance area at 360, 370, then we actually have two time frames in gear. Pretty interesting from that standpoint. Lastly, this Zscaler has been one of the better stocks. Low ADX here, low ADX here, and then we get a breakout, and it's just taken off like a rocket. It is pretty overdone in my view in the short term. I think we need some backing and filling before we get another entry set up. Thanks for joining me. If you have any stock requests, you can send them to stocktalk@stockcharts.com or just put them in the comment area below. Also, if you want to learn more about some of these techniques, I would suggest going to my YouTube channel. Have a great week, and we'll see you next time.